Lane, this is Anne Marie. Did you have a question?
Hi, Anne Marie, we were just logging on.
Okay.
Okay. So what I'm mainly going to talk about in this, hey, Ted,
Hey, Bonnie, how are you?
good, in this stuff is, this is my, telling Dennis, it's my remarks on Fisher's Cove. Mainly, I'm going through some procedural things, just to make it clear what is not, what we do not think is a problem with what LPC did.
Mhm.
A, to make them feel better, hopefully, but B, just to get it in the record.
Okay,
So if I go on a little bit, that's my rationale. That's what I'm doing.
okay.
Uh-oh, Dennis is at the other end of my dining room table
Uh-oh,
having issues.
no food fights.
Well, no, I mean, we can get him a,
When I hit join a meeting, I put the ID in
yeah.
304.
Can you flip your camera around when he speaks so that he could use your camera?
No, we can get him one of Brooke's iPads.
Okay,
Let me get it just in case you can't
When I
get in.
say join,
Yeah,
then it says, put your password in,
and you're going round and round, right?
and I'm doing, put my password in, 478. Eight. Continue.
here's Fred. Hey, Fred. Hey, Glenn.
How are you, Mayor?
Good.
Good.
Hopefully the bulk of the storm has passed by now.
Right.
Supposed to get a second wave.
Okay. Hello, Fred. How you doing?
Hey, doing? I called Anne Marie. If I leave all of a sudden, I'm expecting a call from the family doctor.
No problem.
Okay, so Lois had a fainting spell.
Oh, really? I'm sorry to hear that. Is that your call?
Hello? Oh, yes, Dr. Sagal.
Go ahead, Fred.
Anne Marie, can you mute him?
Yeah, let's mute Fred.
Well,
Thanks.
Thanks, Glenn. That was good.
Sure.
FYI, the garden tour has officially been canceled. I got an email from Betsy.
Mm,
Yeah, you get into Zoom.
See what happens when it comes up here? I put in my password and ID and password, but this comes up.
Right there, there's a throw up.
I broke it.
Okay, there's a
Hello.
throw.
Hey, Rob.
I'm in my quarantine case, I'm not in my.
Can you see if you can get Dennis in? We're working on getting Dennis in.
So how do, where's the link? What do I,
Oh, do you have Zoom on that?
yeah, but I need a link, I need
I
a
think
meeting.
Dennis has it.
Well, I have mine, but this, yours has probably worked better than mine.
You need-
But she's not registered on there, is she?
No, but if you send me your
If you-
email that gave you the link,
It's right there, isn't it?
don't know
I
where
need
to
to
go.
have it
How
sent.
about
to
if I
me.
send the one that Anne Marie sent me?
Go
Would
ahead.
that work? Okay.
Well, yeah, you maybe, send it to me to my.
I can resend, I can resend Dennis his, but
That
that,
doesn't come,
It needs to
That's-
come to me.
I'm forwarding it to you.
oh,
right-
well, I can do that, maybe.
If you do that to my Gmail, brookehedge@gmail.com, then I can get Dennis on.
Okay.
Now,
Amber,
you
you're
know,
not on camera.
Yeah, I planned
you-
it that way.
Have
I'll
a
put
bad
myself on
hair?
camera. I had it off while we were waiting.
I thought maybe you were having a bad hair day.
Nah, well.
Okay.
I did trim my bangs and it didn't turn out well, but that's a whole different issue.
Uh-oh.
Is that why we can't see you?
Well, no, I didn't put my video on yet.
Okay.
So,
Brooke's working on getting,
I haven't got an email yet.
she's waiting for the email.
yeah, I'm working on it.
Okay.
Had to go
Hmm.
copy, paste. Oh, that's not it. Okay. It gave a YouTube. Hold on. Now let me disregard that, Brooke. I'm going to send you something else.
Okay.
One thing about it, after this is all over, we're going to be pretty proficient with all this.
Yes, we are.
Certainly gonna be better at it.
Well, I don't know that I'll be ever.
We can't be worse.
My question is, why
That's true.
does it work for you guys and not for me?
I don't know. Dennis is asking a perfectly reasonable question, which is why do I have no trouble getting on, but he does? Is there like just a gremlin in
Is
his,
it the way it's set up? Do they have the right email address? I don't know.
I don't know.
But you've gotten the emails. It's just not working from the link.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
so Brooke, you should have it now.
I do. Now,
I
let me,
hear noise.
but I think I'm coming in just not as a person who can be in it. It's not showing Dennis. It's just
And,
showing,
But Anne Marie can elevate him to a participant.
Yeah, I can elevate.
yeah, elevate me to a participant and then, but it's gonna show my name, not Dennis's.
That's okay.
I hear noise.
But I think I'm coming in just.
Okay, so now I got to find you. There's a lot of people on, so.
Now, what's the matter with yours? Let me see yours.
See what happens.
I don't see Brooke
And
on here.
password, so I put that in and then this comes up.
Looks like we lost Fred too.
We muted him.
Okay. He's dropped off of my screen as even being on.
Yeah, you may have de-elevated Fred in the process of trying to elevate Brooke.
Maybe he hung up.
Maybe. Well, maybe he got
Now,
off.
I mean, Brooke has the, has our images on her screen.
I'm just,
Now, one thing that,
Anne Marie, how did you send Dennis his link to get on?
it would have gone through email back when the meeting was set up.
Do you have a copy of Dennis's for that?
Well, that's what I just sent you.
she said that's what she just sent you.
The topic was take two.
Can you put that number in this?
I've
one?
got, okay, got take two.
Just for whoever's listening, Dennis's internet is out, so he's over at Bonnie's house. And so
It says, please enter meeting password.
Okay.
Dennis has one. What is it?
And
We all have the same.
709.
Yep, 455.
See, I don't have to put in a password when I
I didn't either. From my email, I didn't have.
just
one.
went from straight up. There's
oh,
Brooke.
there's Brooke. So
There's
that,
Brooks. Now trade book for Bonnie, or for Dennis. And
There's internet audio. Is that all right? There you go. There's gallery view.
so one of you guys will need to mute or you'll have to go in other rooms or else we'll have a,
You're gonna have to-
Okay, I'll go in another room.
We'll have feedback otherwise.
Yeah, I'll go in another room. Hang on. Whoops. I think I just turned myself off.
No, you're on.
Okay,
Yeah, go to the garden room, but no, you gotta go to the garden room.
okay. Yeah, but I've done something. Oh, hang on, I can go.
We
right.
can
Okay,
still hear you.
go to the wicker room.
Well, I'm being sent to the far end of the house. Hang on.
It's a virtual tour.
What can I say?
Now, why could you guys do this and I can't? I don't know. That's better.
You can.
Okay, but now
So it's not-
I don't see any of you now.
The pad doesn't, the taping pad doesn't work, but you can
We
move.
can see you.
That works better, thanks.
Okay, here we go. Okay.
So now we're still
Fred?
missing, no, we're still missing Fred.
It's gonna be weird. I don't have a desk, but oh, thank you. Okay, I'm literally doing this from my couch. I was at least at the dining room table. Anne Marie, how do you have that nifty background behind you?
It's a virtual background, so it's an aerial of Lewis.
Yes, you
Look,
have the wharf behind you.
Yep.
Yeah, it makes you look a little odd, I have to tell you. You
Yeah,
look
because you fade
sort of
in and out of it.
Well, you know,
Huh. Okay.
see,
Uh,
you're ready to be on WRDE now.
Yeah.
You can be a reporter. Well, okay, Fred's back. Good. Fred, you okay?
I got it taken care of. Thank you very much. I apologize.
No problem. We got everybody else hooked up while you were taking care of that. So I think we're good to go. So it is 2:07 on Monday, April the 13th, and this is the monthly meeting of the Mayor and City Council. Call a meeting to order. I think we can suspend with the Pledge of Allegiance. And we'll go right into announcements. First of all, I want to thank the community for all they're doing to comply with the governor's orders. As anyone would know, the short-term rental ban that the governor enacted last week has taken effect, and our city employees have been checking with all of our rental license holders to make sure that they are complying with that. And we have also the 14-day quarantine for people who are coming from out of state to be here, and the Lewis Police Department is helping to monitor that. We still have the signage on Kings Highway, Savannah Road, and Cape Penelope Drive. And the beaches are open, although the parking lots are closed. The beaches are open for walking your dog, or personal exercise. Obviously, social distancing is required. At a previous meeting, we delayed the implementation of the meter season until at least May 15th. We may revisit that at some point in the future. And City Hall remains closed, but we do have Sue Ann Hennessy, who is taking messages, and also you can do a lot of things online directly on your own through City Hall. Be sure to check the city's website for that. Our trash and recycle services are being implemented and stepped up on an as-need basis. And I would also like to commend BB Hospital and Dr. Tam and the entire staff over there for all they're doing to be able to help to address the needs and also to educate the public. If you haven't visited their website, I would encourage you to go to their website and look at their information about social distancing and other things related to how you can avoid contracting the virus yourself. They've done an outstanding job. And I know there was some confusion last Thursday evening when all of the local fire departments surrounded the hospital and put off their sirens. It was a positive thing, not anything other. And it was very well received by the hospital. It was done at the change of shifts. And so it was an opportunity to give oncoming staff members and those who were getting off a chance to be recognized. And I know they were very greatly appreciative of the effort put forth by many of the surrounding departments, fire departments. And they left here and went over to Nanticoke. So they did the same thing over there. It was very touching. So they may do it again. If they do it again, I beg your pardon?
I said it actually
I didn't hear you.
It brought tears to my eyes. That's all I said.
Okay. And if if they do it again, hopefully we'll have a little more advanced notice so we can send out a notice so we don't alarm anyone. Is the chief on? My understanding was he was going to be on this, and I was going to
Yes,
have him talk about what the PD has been doing.
The
I don't-
chief's on
Can
and
you
he's
elevate him to a
unmuted.
participant?
I am on, Mayor.
Okay. Okay. You're not coming up on my list of participants here.
He's
But anyway,
he's
if
on
you-
by telephone.
Okay, great. Thanks, chief. So you
Yeah.
want to go ahead and talk to us a little bit about what the PD's been doing?
Yeah,
Please.
sure. Obviously, we've been pretty intimately involved. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. We've been, you know, pretty involved, to be honest with you, for the past week and a half. And we've compiled some statistics, which I guess I just want to go over real quick. If I could, since Thursday of last week, we have responded to and handled 54 separate citizen-generated complaints and property checks. A variety of different complaints where neighbors thought that their neighbors were coming in and needed to be reminded of the quarantine, which we certainly did, as well as property checks for people that are out of town and can't get here to check on their properties. On top of that, we conducted 215 vehicle stops and literature distributions to parked out-of-state vehicles. 215 of those. We've deployed our drone 5 separate times for a total of 12 different runs throughout our beaches, our trails, as well as the downtown and East Savannah Street corridor. We visited every open restaurant, make sure they're in compliance with the restrictions set by the governor. We've also posted flyers at 23 different businesses speaking about the restrictions for out-of-staters to be shopping. And we've also utilized our all-terrain vehicle and patrolled beaches on 12 separate occasions since Thursday. What else would you like to know? Anything?
You put flyers out on cars parked.
Any questions?
Say that one more time, please.
Did you put the flyer, you all did put flyers out on out-of-state cars parked in driveways, as I understand it?
Yes, we did. We initially thought we were only going to do public property, but I made the decision that if they're in a driveway and it's visible, to go ahead and put the reminder on the windshield.
Thank you.
So we did.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from council members or Anne Marie for the chief at this point? Okay. Hearing none, I think we could talk about the agenda for a moment. We're going to move item I1 up to be considered at the same time we're considering item H1. Those are relating to Fisher Cove. And we are also going to be deleting I7, which is relating to the M&T lot usage. We're still waiting for additional information from some of the contractors. We didn't get all the bid information in, so we're not ready to act on that. And then we'll also be deleting item I8, which has to do with the proposed charter change being sent forward. So those items will not be part of today's agenda. Does anyone else have any additions or deletions they would like to make or comments they would like to make before we get started with the actual meeting? Okay. Hearing none, I have no proclamations or appointments today. So we can move into the consent agenda, which consists of the mayor and city council meeting minutes from the March 13th, March 30th, and April 1st, as well as the Board of Public Works meeting minutes from January of 20, and the police reports for February and March, financial activity reports, fire department activity reports for both February and March. And we'll defer and hear from Anne Marie when we get through with that. Any comment or anybody want to pull any of those items out of the agenda to discuss individually? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
I move we approve the consent agenda as stated.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Moving on, Anne Marie. an outstanding job of getting things organized. You and all the staff at City Hall, we really are most appreciative of everything that's been done, and also the fact that so many of the administrative people are able to function remotely and keep things running pretty much as they would be if they were in the office. So thank you.
Well, that's been a lot of teamwork. I know in terms of the telework side of things, Ellen Lorraine spent a lot of time with our IT person getting computers set up and out the door. As I'm sure you can expect, the majority of the month of March and a lot of the month of April has been spent dealing with kind of some of the mitigation effects of just operating in the current environment. We've had 2 meetings of the Board of Health on, actually, no, we've had 3. We've had 3 meetings of the Board of Health on March 11th,
Right.
25th, and then April 8th. As you know, on March 13th, council met and you adopted the budget. Of course, we know we have to watch everything very closely because we do know that there will be some revenue streams that are affected by the various orders associated with the state of emergency. We have, because of the stay-at-home order, we've seen that there's a lot of trash being generated. We have provided one day where we did an extra trash pickup the week before last, and then last Thursday we did a supplemental trash and recycling pickup. Our yard waste is continuing as scheduled. The bulk pickup days are postponed until the state of emergency lifts. At this point, we have them tentatively scheduled for May 13th and 20th, but based on how things progress, it may have to be pushed again. We are asking people not to put trash outside of their cans. We're pretty much dumping what's in the cans and that's it. That's part of the reason that we did feel it was important when the volume was very high to provide some supplemental pickups. We are not planning a supplemental pickup this week, but we will see what the future weeks hold. We, as you can see, based on the current configuration, we have moved very quickly to telecommuting for many of our staff, as well as being able to meet remotely. In addition to council and the Board of Health, we did have one Board of Elections meeting. That was actually an in-person meeting that we broadcast over Zoom. And then the subcommittees for the Planning Commission have also used Zoom to hold their meetings to work on the wetland buffer ordinance and ordinances related to sea level rise. We have the subcommittee that has been organized to address Bill and the floodplain will meet next week on the 23rd. The city has utilized the Code Red system both to send some telephone broadcasts, but we've been sending probably a couple of times a week. We've been sending email notifications through the Code Red system. The mayor has sent out a couple of notifications. I've shared some things from the police department. We've started a Facebook page to communicate. That's something I've resisted for a long time, but so far it seems to be working pretty well. Obviously, with the revenues a little bit uncertain at the time, we are working hard to control expenses on our end. We have a number of vacant positions that will remain vacant while we try to weather this storm. The mayor and Ellen Lorraine and I have participated in teleconferences weekly with the governor. We've also participated in teleconferences with BB. I think everybody knows that the election is postponed. We have 5 candidates running. That is Fred Buffet, Kay Carnahan, Dennis Reardon, Tim Ritzert, and Andrew Williams. But the election will be the Saturday after 45 days after the emergency is lifted. voter registration is open until 15 days prior to that. So as soon as the state of emergency is lifted, and again, I'm not sure that it's going to be lifted all at once, but once some of the measures that don't allow people to gather, we'll schedule the election based on that. We have had a couple of personnel changes. We had 3 retirements. Unfortunately, we didn't get to celebrate the very long careers of Fred Slater, Garland Ayers, and Gilbert Holt. Alice Erickson has left. Rick Melendez has been promoted to the maintenance department manager. Kenny Morris has been promoted to the street foreman. Allison Kirk is now the facilities foreman. And then we've hired Sean Davis and Daniel Whitcomb. Surprisingly, we have had quite a bit of building permit activity still, even with the current state of emergency. So we do have Robin Davis is in the office. He's been doing inspections. Henry Bainham has been telecommuting and taking care of all of the permit review. We've been able to process payments remotely. We've got some online portals, and we also have the ability for staff to do some things remotely in that regard. So it's been a very interesting, busy month, but our staff has really kind of all stepped in. And I think at this point, you know, we've used Zoom for staff meetings, for some of our smaller meetings, we're using Microsoft Teams. So we're all becoming a little more comfortable with technology, and we're keeping things going. So.
Good. Any questions for Anne Marie?
Not a question, but a comment. Anne Marie, when Ted was giving his kudos to you and the staff, he's speaking for all of us.
Well, thank you. And again, it was absolutely teamwork.
I do have one question. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Anne Marie, on the February managers report on the second page, it says, on February 19th, Mayor Becker and I met with Shantae Hastings, the chief engineer of DelDOT, to discuss the city's request to remove the ballast in the railroad right-of-way. The cost of removal is prohibitively high. Could you speak to that a little bit?
So my recollection, and Ted, this is a while ago, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. The ballast removal came in at over $750,000. And that just wasn't something that the department could absorb in their budget. I know that we had talked, I think initially just after that, I think Ted, you had talked to Ernie, and we were going to try to work something through the bond bill. I'm sure that the current situation with revenues down and a lot of things unpredictable, I'm not quite sure that we're going to be able to get the funding. What we may have to do is figure out ways that we can work to beautify the area without having the ballast removed. Ted, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Well, we did have a meeting with Shantae, as everyone would recognize. It was originally just included in the removal, was a proposal to remove it, was included in the FY20 budget for DelDOT, and then they put it out to bid, and as Anne Marie indicated, the bid came in very high, and that was not what they anticipated. Obviously, they hadn't anticipated it being as high as it was. So they are looking for other ways that they might address it. And I did speak with Ernie Lopez, Senator Lopez, about the possibility of adding it to the bond bill for consideration. He was very receptive to the idea of working with that. There also was some discussion about whether or not one of the concerns about the ballast was it contaminated ballast, and given the fact that the rail line had been inactive for such a long time, I raised the question of, has there been any testing about whether or not it is contaminated? What we found when in both Canal Front Park and when we were working on the site for the library was that the contamination that was in both of those locations, because it had been dormant for so long, if there was any, it had percolated through the soil. And so the soil was not nearly as contaminated as it might have, that they would follow up on that. To date, we have not had any response yet back on whether there's been additional testing done or not. So it is a very active discussion, although moving at a snail's pace today, given what else has happened and transpired since we had that meeting. It's not off the table. I know we had hoped that it would be done in this fiscal year, but I don't think it's going to happen in this fiscal year. Again, and Senator Lopez is aware of it, and we are looking for ways to fund it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions for Anne Marie? Okay. I see Rob, I see you responded to the question about whether or not you were on, so that's good. Okay, great. Moving on, then I think we can go to item H. I beg your pardon?
Obviously, I haven't been talking enough.
Okay. I think we can move.
Try to fix that.
Oh, yeah, well, your picture disappeared too for a while. So. Actually,
I'm sure you'll
yeah,
correct
okay. I think we can move on then to item H. There'll be ample opportunity. Moving on then to item H1, which is presentation of possible action on the LPC recommendation 631 for the rejection of preliminary consent for Fisher's Cove major subdivision to create 18 residential lots on the parcel near Rodney Avenue, Sussex County Tax Map 3-35-4.00-15.00. As this has gone on for quite a long time, and I think we were intended to address it last month, but our meeting got truncated and we did not get to it. We didn't have adequate time to consider it. So we now, I believe all of us have had enough time to review it. There was a lot of public input. There's been a lot of back and forth with the developer. The Planning Commission has worked hard to assess all the various points that they needed to evaluate in this. And they have come up with a recommendation to deny the preliminary consent. And at this point, I would like to turn it over to Dennis Reardon, who is the council representative to the Board of Public, or to the Planning Commission. So Dennis, if you would like to talk further about what happened.
Yes, thank you, Ted.
Thank you.
I'd like to make some opening remarks first. And for the clarification of the public that are not really familiar with the major subdivision code, but normally when an application for a major subdivision goes before the Planning Commission, preliminary consent would be usually given by the Planning Commission and it would not come to council. In this case, the Planning Commission made a recommendation to deny preliminary consent, and that's why the issue is currently before mayor and council. We have three options. We can confirm the recommendation of the Planning Commission. We can overturn their recommendation and grant preliminary consent, or we can remand it back to the Planning Commission. As everyone knows, this decision is based on what was in the public record. The public record was closed on February the 28th at 4 o'clock. Each of us has had an opportunity to review all the information that has been submitted. And what I would like to do at this point is I have some issues I'd like to see further developed by the Planning Commission. And so I'm going to make a motion. Then it would be open for discussion by everyone. And I want to hit on the first item that I think should be further developed by the Planning Commission is the stormwater management.
Dennis, before we do that, do you want to do your motion and then get a second on it and then open it for discussion?
Well, I was going to, this is the motion, I'm making a motion now, and this is my recommendation. My motion is to remand this to the Planning Commission. And with these items that I'm going to go over, to have them further develop those items before they make another decision. So the motion is to remand, and these are the developing things that I would like to see the Planning Commission review in more detail. First is the stormwater management. And what is the current plan to address the stormwater management, flooding, and is it viable? There are special considerations are there special considerations because of the water table? And if necessary, would suggest the Planning Commission use an expert in this field to help the council's consideration going forward. Also, number 2, I'd like to see AECOM flood model run with numbers based upon more engineering and stormwater calculations. Third, I'd like to see the Sussex County Conservation District review agency for the flooding and stormwater management that we have discussed. I'd like to know from them their comments on the proposed stormwater management. The 4th item would be, I'd like to have a better understanding of what improvements to Rodney Street Avenue might be required if Rodney is to provide access to the major subdivision. The item number 5 would like to see something on what is going to be the impact of the topography change in the use of fill in this project. And the last one, the 5th one would be, how are they going to, well, that would be it. That would be the 5. So I would like to make a motion to remand and have the Planning Commission review those 5 items at this
Second,
point in time.
Fred, are you seconding the motion?
yes.
Okay, great. So we have a motion and a second. I think we should open it up for discussion at this point. Would anyone like to speak up first? Rob, Bonnie?
Well, I wanted to clarify one of Dennis's, this is Rob, one of Dennis's suggested requests to the Planning Commission about topography. This is, Dennis, I gather you're referring to the changes in topography, not just from fill, but from excavating to obtain fill, and the effect of the topography on the flooding and the stormwater management system. Is that what that's driving at?
Yes, sir, that would be correct. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you. Ted, that's the only question I had right now.
Okay, Bonnie, you have any questions at this point?
I don't have any questions. I did jot down some notes, but I don't know if it's appropriate for now or, I mean, I assume, Glenn, that you're going to poll the council.
We'll do it. Yes, we'll do a roll call vote, please.
Okay, the only thing I wanted to get sort of down, and I'll get to the substance later when we do the roll call vote, but I did want to make just a couple of comments about the Planning Commission process, just so that the record is, I understand it at our level is clear in terms of how we understand the recommendation that came to us from the Planning Commission. And that is that the Planning Commission fully followed the applicable procedures governing preliminary consent found in Chapter 170. Just wanted to put that to rest. Both the applicant and the public had the opportunity to provide information, comment, and testimony in the administrative record, and they did so. The Planning Commission considered whether preliminary consent could be granted with conditions and determined that it could not be. There was a proper motion and second before the Planning Commission, and that the Planning Commission, consistent with section 170-19F as in Frank 1, has prepared and council has received a report with reasons stated for the Planning Commission's recommendation, and the applicant has been given that report. Those are just the preliminaries that I thought needed to be stated clearly.
Thank you. Fred, do you have any other comment?
Not other than just to say, I think the information we're looking for with respect to flooding and stormwater needs to be focused on the property of Fisher's Cove, not a general flooding study, but we're really interested in what's happening on that property and how it impacts the residents on Rodney. And they need to be very specific, and they need to give us good, hard data as to what we can expect, and that can be done. And so I'm not looking for a generality. I'm looking for specifics on that property and its impact on Rodney. So other than that, I'm good with the motion. I think it has to be done.
Okay. All right. I think that there are considerable concerns about stormwater management as well. And I think, I know the Sussex County Conservation District is normally a little later in the process, but I think given the concerns that have been expressed, that's an appropriate thing to get some information on as soon as possible. So we have a motion and a second, Glenn, we want to do a roll call vote.
We do, Mayor. Can I add
Who'd
one
like to
thing?
go
though?
first?
Can I add one thing, Mayor?
Sure.
The only thing I wanted to mention is in the motion, there is a mention of the possible use of an expert as to stormwater management and flooding. Can we just
Right.
all agree that that'll be in coordination with the city manager, so any budgetary concerns she might have are able to be addressed?
Yes.
Absolutely.
I
Thank
think
you.
that would be certainly implied, but always good to put it in the motion. So
Can I add one thing to what Fred said? Which is, I agree that we need information specific to this particular application, but the analysis of potential flooding issues or increased flooding issues needs to be not just for Rodney, but for the surrounding, it needs to be for any property that would be affected by additional water problems as a result of this development.
I agree. And
Just
I
to be
think
clear.
this is Rob. I think that's what Fred was getting at. He was getting at not, we don't want a generalized redo of the flood study. We want a
Right.
flood study focused on this application.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, and I agree. It's just that he limited his comments to Rodney, and I just wanted to be clear that it's
I
not
think that's
just
a good
Rodney, it's other streets as well.
it's all the
Agree.
surrounding neighborhood. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right. Dennis, you want to go first?
Question.
Go ahead. What do you have, Fred?
Pardon?
Go ahead.
I vote in favor of the motion. I think that we just don't have enough information to really understand the impact of this development. And so I'm very much in favor of giving the Planning Commission the opportunity to study this again. They were under pressure of time before, and I think now they need a little time to study the issue. So I'm in favor.
Okay. Rob, you want to weigh
Sure.
in?
I vote in favor also. I would note that the Planning Commission did ask for more information, and it wasn't always successful in getting it on the ground that the applicant thought the information was appropriate for a later stage. But we need the information, I think, at this stage in order to properly decide on the application.
Okay.
So I vote in favor.
Thank you, Rob. Bonnie?
Okay, but I'm going to go on for just a little bit because I am mindful of Mr. Vandalis's invocation to us to make a record. So I'm going to be I'm just going to ramble on for a second. And yes, I am reading things in case you're wondering why I'm looking at
Rambo.
the planning. You ready?
Yes.
Everybody, come on, it won't take that long, I promise. The Planning Commission based its recommended denial on stormwater and flooding concerns, as well as on the use of Rodney Avenue as access. In light of the administrative record and the Planning Commission's report, it is, in my view, a very close question whether to agree with the Planning Commission at this point and deny preliminary consent on the water management issues. This is principally due to the failure of the applicant to carry its burden at this juncture to satisfy subsections 1, 3, and 11 of section 170-19E as in easy of Lewis Code concerning compliance with zoning and other provisions of code, and specifically flooding and stormwater concerns. These are not matters that should be left exclusively to the final disposition of the application. Rather, they are factors expressly required at the preliminary consent stage of review as part of the section 170-19 is easy one analysis. With regard to flooding and stormwater management, the applicant submitted 3 proposed solutions to these issues, seriatim, and also chose to include in the record at the 11th hour a 4th idea, which it advertised as the best solution and which bore no relationship to the first 3 proposals. This course of action by the developer has muddled the record, as the Planning Commission noted. There's no question that the parcel proposed for development is in the floodplain and that flooding occurs on this and on neighboring parcels. Furthermore, as the Planning Commission found, The city's flood study demonstrated that additional water from or involving this proposed development is likely to cause additional flooding problems for other properties. Finally, given the high water table under this parcel, which already has contributed to abandonment of one of the applicant's proposed stormwater solutions, these stormwater and flooding issues are matters of critical importance. The Planning Commission and the Council, as well as the many citizens and neighbors concerned about this proposed development, deserve at the preliminary consent stage a clear, fleshed out proposal from the developer on flooding and stormwater that is capable of being meaningfully reviewed by experts in this area. So those are my reasons for voting yes to remand this matter to the Planning Commission for further development of the administrative record on these issues. That's it. See, it didn't take that long.
And I'll just remind you that you can absolutely rely upon Councilperson Osler's reasons in giving your reasons.
Yes, and I vote yes for the motion and for the reasons stated, but I also would like to add that the Planning Commission did a really good job. They gave this every consideration possible in the face of, as Bonnie said, 3 iterations of the stormwater management, none of which, or the last one of which really didn't have any meat on the bone. It was just a proposal. So I think the Planning Commission did a really good job under the 90-day time constraint. And as I said, I vote yes for the motion based on what was said.
Great. Thank you, Dennis. And I will vote in favor of the motion as well for the reasons previously stated. But I do think it's worth noting that this is a very difficult parcel to develop. And the idea that we need more information regarding the Conservation District weighing in that would automatically occur later in the process is warranted now for the various reasons of 4 proposals on how to deal with the work of the stormwater were submitted, and there was concern there. So I think getting as much information and coming up with a read from that would be very helpful earlier in the process rather than later. And so I think that is important. I also recognize that in order for this parcel to be developed as it's proposed, it could result in significant changes in Rodney Avenue. And I think we need to understand exactly what those changes might be. So I vote in favor for those reasons, as well as those that have been previously stated.
Yeah, I think the other question on Rodney is how minimal can those changes be?
Exactly. What's the overall impact?
Right.
We know that the street is varied in width, although there is a 50-foot right of way, but that is the actual paved width is quite narrow in places and widens out in others. And we just need to know what it looks like. Yeah,
to me, the question is, if with the addition of the average daily trips for this development, if, and I stress if, this development is ever approved, given the problems with the site, can we simply recreate the travel lanes that are there?
Mm-hmm.
You know, as that be sufficient from a safety standpoint, and thereby minimize the impact on the people who live on Rodney Street?
Right. Okay.
Do we need to declare the vote as being unanimous?
We do. We would note the vote is unanimous. Glenn, do you have any other comments at this point?
I'll just mention, Mayor, that there's been a question that's come in through the chat as to what the statutory timing is now for
Right, I saw that question. Yeah.
the Planning Commission to act. The code is silent on a remand, the process that's supposed to go forward. My presumption is that it'll be very likely to the process that was followed during the first hearing. So without saying more and without having really looked at it in detail, I don't remember having one remanded before. That's what I expect, is that it'll probably follow the same kind of path that it originally followed for the first hearing.
Okay, thank you. All right, so thank you all. And again, thanks to the Planning Commission for their effort to get it to this point. And while we're sending it back, I think we've provided some direction in terms of what we would like to see before we actually get back involved in it, or before they make another recommendation. Thank you. Okay, let's move on then to item I1, which is the presentation and possible action on the Planning Commission's recommendation 634 for for the approval of a minor subdivision of Fister's Cove submitted by Fuquay Willard Stevens Shop of PA on behalf of Burke and Reteki LLC for the conveyance of 0.25 acres of land from Sussex County Tax Map 335-4.14-103.00 to Sussex County Tax Map 3-35-4.00-15.00. This was a request that was before the Planning Commission, and it was voted in favor by 6 of the 7 members present, with 1 member, Kay Carnahan, recusing. Dennis, you want to again talk through this a little bit since you are the representative to the Planning Commission?
Yes, in this particular case, it appears to me that all of the statutory requirements for a minor subdivision in the code have been met. And based on that, I would make a recommendation that we approve the Planning Commission recommendation 634 as presented.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Fred.
So that's a motion, not a recommendation, a motion to approve. I think Councilperson Reardon used the word recommendation. Just want to clarify that.
Yeah. Thank you for the correction. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Bonnie or Rob, you have anything you want to add first?
Bonnie?
Yeah, I guess 2 observations on this. My understanding is that where the statutory prerequisites for a minor subdivision have been met, council really doesn't have much discretion. And so, you know, that's it. I mean, the issue here that the Planning Commission was trying to address for a long time was whether or not an alternative access to the Fisher's Cove parcel could be had over a portion of the Fisher's Paradise House parcel. And my understanding is that ultimately city staff determined that there was not sufficient frontage there to accommodate an entrance. So that wasn't a viable alternative. There was some question about could it be a private road, but private roads are specifically prohibited under the subdivision code. So it is a shame, I think, that this access can't happen over a portion of land already owned by this developer. But as I understand it, that's not feasible. And given that, or even in spite of that, the other statutory preconditions, as Dennis said, have been met, and therefore the city doesn't have a whole lot of discretion on this one.
And I would add, Mayor, that the minor and the major are obviously very closely related in many ways, and it would have been nice to keep them together, but we've been advised there's no remand option for a minor subdivision application. So this, as Dennis and Bonnie have both said, we don't have a lot of discretion here.
Okay. Fred or Bonnie, or Fred or Dennis, do you have anything you want to add?
No.
Okay. Okay, and I would note that I misspoke when I said earlier it was unanimous. It was actually 6-1 with 1 additional recusal. So, all right, do we need to do a roll call on this, Glenn? Or are you okay with not?
Yeah, I would still like to do a roll call, Mayor.
Okay,
Please.
fine.
Okay.
All right. So who would like to go first? Fred, you want to go
I
first?
will. I voted for it. I think it met all of the requirements of the ordinances, and it would be very difficult for us to turn it down for any other reasons. And so I think it is what it is, and I vote for it.
Okay. Bonnie, Rob?
Well, this is Rob. I will also vote for it for the reasons that Dennis and Bonnie and I have given. I don't think we have a lot of discretion, and the code requirements have been met, so I vote yes.
Okay. Bonnie?
This is Bonnie. I reluctantly vote yes, because I don't think we have a choice, but perhaps more importantly, because it doesn't sound like this would be available for, even if we did, it wouldn't be feasible as an alternative access point to a road into this proposed development anyway.
Okay. Dennis?
Yeah. And I will vote yes, and we have no discretion. the code requirements have been met. And I would have preferred a different outcome, but we have to vote yes, and I will.
Okay. And I too will vote yes for the reasons that have been stated. And I, you know, it's a wonderful parcel. It is unfortunate though that it can't be used in other ways. So anyway, I think we have a unanimous vote here. Glenn, you okay?
Yes.
Great. Back to item H2, which is presentation and possible action on the Planning Commission recommendation 632 for the approval of further amendments to the Planning Commission bylaws as per the January 20th Mayor and Council meeting. This has come back into us again based upon the comments that we had made at our January meeting. I would open it up for discussion. If anyone has any comments, if you referred back to the January meeting, I think that our concerns had been pretty much addressed in this. So, but I would certainly welcome any input from any of you.
I think that what we have in front of us is just a change in replacement of an individual.
Correct.
And what was in the bylaws was in conflict with what was in the charter.
Mhm.
In the charter, it says that replacement would be done by mayor with the consent of council.
Mhm.
And in the bylaws, it called for a public hearing with calls to remove someone. And that's what is being deleted from the bylaws.
Great. Okay. Any other comments?
All right, I would make a recommendation.
How about a
that we-
motion instead of a recommendation?
But, excuse me, I'll make a recommendation that we approve the request.
I think you meant a motion again, but that's okay.
Yeah, make a motion to approve the request, the recommendation from the planning commission.
There you go.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second? Fred, did I hear second from you? Okay, all those in favor?
Uh,
Okay, any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item H3 is presentation possible on action on an ordinance to amend the city code to replace the yield sign at the intersection of East Third and Rhodoline Avenue with a stop sign. We did this, we considered this earlier and we agreed to it, but we didn't amend the ordinance of the city in the city code to allow for this. So this is more or less a buttoning up, correct, Anne Marie, of what we already agreed to.
That's correct.
Any discussion?
It does do one additional thing, Mayor. This is Glenn. The code was silent on the stop sign that currently exists at Rhodoline and Schley. This inserts that stop sign in as well.
Yeah.
It's already-
And Rhodoline and Schley have become or Rhodoline and Third Street have become much more heavily used over the years, and especially as traffic has come in from Gills Neck and people wanting to get to downtown and not have to deal with the stop light at Savannah Road. So I think this is an appropriate addition. All those, if we have a motion in a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Moving on to item H4 is presentation of possible action on a temporary and/or placement of the swing bridge on the property at the end of American Legion Road owned by the city of Lewis, Sussex County Tax Map 335-9.00-22. We heard this at our meeting last month, and then it was being considered as a possible placement on the Kennedy property located along Gills Neck Road. However, this parcel, which belongs to the city, was identified as part of that parcel or as part of that consideration. And it was not noticed that we would be possibly considering that at our last meeting. So we deferred action and did not consider it at that time. However, there has been, this is a parcel that has come to the attention of those interested in preserving the bridge. And I think they have developed an interesting proposal here, which they'll walk us through. I believe Randy Voigt is on the phone. And Anne Marie, if you could give him access to talk, he can walk us through this presentation. Do you, by any chance, have his presentation to put up on the screen?
I do. I'm putting it up. I don't see Randy on the line. I don't know if he's called in by phone.
Oh, my goodness. I certainly hope so.
Oh, hold on. There he is. Hold on. He just popped up.
Okay, good.
I found him.
Great. Okay.
Eddie didn't know he was lost.
Okay, so he's
whole time.
unmuted. And I am going to put up the presentation.
I was here the whole time. Can you hear me?
And
Yeah, we got you, Randy. Thank you. Thanks
So
for
I'm-
being here.
Sorry, didn't mean to make you sweat for a moment there.
No. We just, we're all learning here.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
Okay. So Anne Marie, we could probably pull over the, there you go. Now,
Thank you.
now everyone can see the entire presentation. So Randy, the floor is yours to walk us through this presentation.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. I appreciate letting us come back to you now. Anne Marie, if you can go to the next page. Again, like when we came on the 30th, we're focused today on the swing bridge over the canal. What we are requesting is consideration and approval for the swing bridge to be moved to property owned by the city. That's at the end of American Legion Road between the bike trail and Freeman Highway. If you haven't looked through the presentation, a couple of slides down, there's a map showing exactly where this will be. Our long-term objective for this parcel is to pursue a long-term lease with the city, similar to the lease the city has with the Overfalls. Okay, next page. Okay. Just briefly want to go through the current status. As the mayor had said, we previously pursued a property along Gills Neck Road that's owned by Mr. Kennedy. We decided, though, on the city of Lewis parcel, after we reviewed the Gills Neck Road, the Kennedy property with the byway committee. The committee expressed safety concerns with locating the bridge on the Gills Neck Road property. It's a narrow property, very close to Gills Neck Road, no sidewalks. So we realized that probably wasn't a good place for the bridge. And we were able to identify this location at the end of American Legion Road. Now, as far as the current status of the bridge, if you will, obviously physically it's in the canal, it's where it was left by the railroad, but DelDOT plans to remove the swing bridge. It's now been moved to July of 2021. It had been the end of this year, but they have moved that to July of next year. However, due to the planning deadlines that DelDOT has to make that date, they need an immediate decision on where they will move the bridge. We've been working with them for a while. They've made clear that they have to plan well ahead to be able to make their dates. And so they really need a decision today. Without a decision today, DelDOT will likely begin planning to demolish the bridge. Now I'm going to go off script for a moment and simply remind everyone this bridge is what's called a bobtail swing bridge. It's manually operated. It's a very rare piece of engineering. And there is a location you can see on the screen now where we could move this. And we ask for council's consideration and approval to move it there. So I want to leave this map up just for a moment, let everybody absorb it. The blue is where we would propose the bridge to be. As you can see, the long axis is parallel to the bike trail. It is right at the end of American Legion Road. I know some of you have looked at the property itself. The specific spot right at the end of American Legion Road on the southeast side of the bike trail, so across from American Legion Road, if you will, is a little higher than the area around it. But in general, I just wanted to see, does anybody have any questions about this location? I want to make sure it's clear where we are looking to move that bridge.
I do.
Okay. If you could go on to the next screen then.
Whoa, wait a minute. I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
I
thought you
raised
said
my
I
hand and
don't.
everything.
Go ahead.
Hey, it's Bonnie.
Yes, Bonnie.
I do have a question about this.
Sure.
This total parcel owned, you're looking at, everybody's looking at the depiction on the screen. The total parcel, according to your presentation with this parcel, is 5¼ acres. So my question is, if we were to put the swing bridge where you're proposing, it basically cuts off any alternative use of this land because it's right there in the middle, just a little off center, but in the middle of the parcel, but it is across from basically the only access point. So my question had to do with whether or not the swing bridge should be moved, if it's placed at all, should be moved closer to the canal, away from, so that the rest of this city-owned area has the possibility for use. I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, that maybe this is the highest spot, but if we're talking about just storing this large girder, in essence, until it goes to a permanent home, which is, I believe, the current request, then why wouldn't we move it out of the way instead of being right there?
I would say, from our standpoint, this is the perfect location for the bridge to be temporarily. And as I said, we would like to go into negotiations for a long-term lease. So we would be looking at this as the long-term location for the bridge.
Okay, so let's just be clear that what we are talking about here, you're really, I mean, the term of this proposed lease is 5 years. So can we just sort of dispense with the fiction that this is a temporary thing and just go to what I mean, because it doesn't sound to me like 5 years, you're really looking for a temporary placement, you're looking for a permanent placement.
Well, we are specifically asking for a temporary location at this time. I don't want to say that we would have it as a permanent until we go into negotiations with the city. But I understand your question.
Sorry, the sun's in my eyes where I was sitting. I'm just moving over here. Yeah, I mean, because it's fun.
Now you're breaking up, Bonnie.
Negotiations, and you were really talking about. Oh, sorry. Let me find somewhere else. Ed, is everybody enjoying the tour of my house? Here we go. How's that?
I understand what Bonnie's saying. And in fact, this is asking for permanent. And I just as soon dispense with the games and recognize that it's going to be the permanent location. And so I don't see going through this charade of a temporary, and that's really not the intent to begin with. So, I don't know. And I understand the need for some permanency. I understand the groups need to have that information to raise their money. And so I just as soon be honest with ourselves and say, okay, this is what we're considering. And
somebody's emails are propping up.
Yeah, somebody's emails are coming up to us. Looks like it's.
I don't know whose these are. They look like they have to do with Fisher.
Yeah, they do.
Anne-Marie, I think they're yours, Anne-Marie. You're sharing your screen, and I think that's what's coming up. There you go.
Back, yeah.
Thank you.
Bonnie, can I just comment about I certainly looking at a position for the bridge is fine, but as you get closer to the canal, it drops off and to wetlands. So at that point, it would not be usable. So it may be able to be shifted, but I get what you're saying.
Well, I mean, we talk a lot about open space and trying to preserve open space and having people have access to open space.
Yeah.
But this putting, what is it, 97 feet of steel right at the entrance. I mean, I understand, don't get me wrong, I understand why they want to put it there, but looking at our overall use of city property, is this really what we want to do, is put this giant piece of metal right there and mean the rest of it is essentially blocked off?
Okay.
Bonnie, from our standpoint, we would be agreeable to put the bridge anywhere on that property that would be feasible. From a flood and well, basically from a floodplain standpoint, this being high is preferable. But if there is another location, we would sure consider what the city has to recommend.
I think that would be, in part of that would be assessed by DelDOT at the time that they evaluate the site for relocating it. Correct, Randy?
I would say that would be a conversation between our group, the city, and DelDOT as to exactly where the bridge is best located.
Well, with all due respect, I think this is a city call. I mean, DelDOT's just trying to get rid of this bridge, right? They don't want it. They want to scrap it.
Well, I
So,
think the only other piece of the call would be having to do with wetlands.
well, again, that gets to the question of whether or not, I mean, the American Legion floods too. I mean, but that really gets to the question of whether or not this is a permanent placement or just a temporary placement. Because you could always raise it. I mean, you can't put anything in the wetlands, obviously, if it's delineated wetlands. But if it's just that it floods, that's a different placement question. But again, it gets to whether this is something that we're going to have forever or until it finds a more suitable home.
Well, I would say we would like this to be the permanent home. We have come to council specifically asking for the temporary, but I understand what you and Fred are saying. And from our standpoint, if that's where the council wants to go today, we would be fine with that. But again, let me be clear, we would like this to be the permanent location. And again, where it is within that parcel, now that we've talked about it, the blue does not have to represent that.
Okay, thank you.
I would assume we simply would be asking the group to take a look at the location and see if they might be able to shift it up or down appropriately to fit the bridge in order to preserve as much open space free of obstruction as they could, and let the group investigate what Bonnie has suggested.
Okay.
And we would be happy to do that. Okay. Any other discussions of this specific location?
No.
Okay, let's move on, if you don't mind, Anne Marie. And Bonnie, I know you've read ahead, obviously, but I want to go over a few details of the bridge itself. The bridge, as Bonnie mentioned, measures 91 feet by 10 feet wide. The city-owned parcel, as she said, is about 5¼ acres. It's approximately 1,750 foot long, about 200 foot wide, where the bridge is shown in the previous diagram. Again, we would recommend that the bridge be placed with the long axis parallel to the railroad right-of-way, the bike trail. I think we've all seen where it is, item 4.
Can I just ask a quick question? But if this lot is about 200, it looks like it's about 200 feet wide all the way up and down. Could it be, to take up less room, could it be placed in parallel to American Legion Road instead? I'm just asking, as opposed to parallel to the bike trail?
It could. Yes, it could.
Okay.
The reason for recommending or suggesting, let me leave it as a suggestion, that it be parallel to the trail or even at a slight angle would be for visibility.
Yes.
The bike trail is, going to be the main visible point for the bridge. And so if you turned it 90 degrees, it would not be nearly as visible. But the exact angle we can work on.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and one thing, as you may have seen on the parcel itself, it is a little wider right at American Legion Road, but not significantly.
A little belly in it there.
Yeah. Okay, so item 5, parking. The former recycling lot that is on American Legion Road. We did measurements of the parking area. We turned to a traffic engineer that we have available to help us. And that traffic engineer said or estimated there are 12 head-in parking spaces there, not parallel parking, but head-in spots at that point. Okay, if you could go on to the next one. Okay, the bridge will have a fence constructed by DelDOT around it. We are going to place warning signs, for safety. The site is ADA accessible by way of the bike trail. Yeah, go ahead, Bonnie.
Could you talk a little bit about what this fence is going to look like and how tall it'll be? Because that goes to, since you're talking about putting this on city land, that goes to the city's potential liability if somebody gets hurt. So I'm curious what kind of fence we're talking about here.
Well, we haven't designed it. What we would expect would be some kind of metal fence that would be painted so that, there's not exposed metal, if you will. How high it would be, I mean, I could say we would estimate maybe around 7 to 8 feet, tall enough to keep people, from being able to easily get over it. What you would have on the top, I would say I wouldn't want to try to design that piece because there's a lot of options for the top of a fence. That's about the best I can answer that, Bonnie.
Because again, the location that you're talking about is pretty desolate. It's away from anything. So unlike the Overfalls, which is in the middle of Canal Front Park, or the side of Canal Front Park, this is really off by itself. And that obviously brings with it the opportunity for mischief. So 7 to 8 feet, that doesn't, I'm not sure that's gonna be enough of a deterrent. It's just my observation on this.
I would point out that since it is by the bike trail, that and bike traffic is growing every month, that it's not going to be so much out of the way. I would be surprised if people were had the temerity to scale the fence when there's bikes going by all the time.
Well, I'm not worried about during the day. I'm worried about at night.
Yeah, I don't think there's any plan to light this. Is there, Randy?
Not at this time, no.
But we don't want a chain link fence with barbed wire on top of it. It's got to be some sort of landscaping, and we're going to have to trust our public to respect it. That may be asking a lot, but I think it's got to be at least a respectable fence that blends in with the fact that this is a monument. So
okay,
we'll have to see what they come up with.
Yeah, and what Fred's talking about goes to point 9, landscaping, which includes anything, including the fence, would be designed so the bridge would fit into its surroundings. So again, we don't have a specific design, but we are very cognizant of wanting to have this bridge not just be 91 foot of girder, but to be a display that is attractive, that is safe, that fits into its surroundings, and that adds value to the bike trail and to really the Lewis area.
Are you planning on opening this up, or is it just permanently kind of fenced off with a marker as to what it is?
We don't know at this point. The fence would have a gate, but the fence would be around it. If the fence is such that visibility through it is clear, there would not be a reason to open it up. Now, on the other side of it, part of the bridge itself is the centerpiece, and how we would interpret the piece that actually turns the bridge. Again, we would want to be able to design that as we go forward. I don't want to speak to exactly how that is. Could it be a separate piece? I don't know, but the bottom line from the safety standpoint, again, at night at least, is the whole project would be encased or enclosed in a fence.
Let me offer, excuse me, if I may, let me offer a challenge. The thing that makes that bridge unique is the fact that it pivots on a pivot.
Correct.
Not because it is supported when it's in place on the two ends. Being supported on the two ends is just another bridge. But what makes it unique is the pivoting. And all of the sketches that you've shown have shown the bridge supported on the two ends. I would challenge you to be able to display that bridge simply supported on its pivots. That's what it's designed for, and that makes it unique. It's going to be a challenge, but I think that really would call people's attention to the bridge rather than just some girders supported on either end like any other bridge. So I propose that challenge to you. How you display that bridge describes its importance. And so,
Fred,
do
I,
that if
I,
you can.
Fred, I appreciate that very much, and I would say that we will take on that challenge. The renderings you have seen so far have been provided by DelDOT, but I am with you. I think that being able to show that bridge in its natural state, so to speak, especially from a structural standpoint, is important. So we accept your challenge.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? I'll keep moving through. There's just a couple more points. Okay, as I said, the site is ADA accessible by way of the bike trail. There is flat access to it. Again, with Bonnie's and Fred's and other comments about where we put it within that property, that there may be some access that might have to be built to get to the bridge, but at the end of American Legion Road and via the bike trail, it would be ADA accessible. The site is accessible by foot, by bike, and by a short walk from a car. I mentioned the parking spaces earlier. They're not that far down. They're maybe 100 yards from the end of American Legion Road. It is not accessible by vehicles. Motorized vehicles of any sort are not accessible to the location we're talking about, nor really to anywhere on that property. Item 8, we want to give the bridge gravity, if you will, historical gravity. We would like to work with the state archives to place a historical marker at the site. So we will be looking into that also if we get approval. And then the last item, item 10, we are working with a couple of companies, a couple of insurance companies, to identify and provide the appropriate vehicles for liability insurance and for guaranteeing the removal of the bridge should that become necessary.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes.
The quote that I'm looking at that was submitted when the idea was to put this over on the Kennedy property
Right.
is each occurrence $1 million, aggregate $2 million on both commercial and operations. It seems, and then $1 million on personal injury. It seems to me, I believe that you all had proposed 500,000, and I think these higher limits I can understand why Mr. Kennedy wanted them. It seems to me the city should be in the same position.
There's a difference there. The city already has insurance. The Kennedy property did not. And as I understand it, Mayor, you checked and the city's insurance will respond?
Yeah, I did. Thanks, Rob. I was going to bring that up. I did check. Our property casualty insurance is with the DFIT through Trident, or through the DFIT with Trident. And I did check with the representative, and Trident would view this as a historical monument, and they would add it to our policy without additional expense. And they would add it to our schedule of property, but they would add it like you would any monument to the property. So they did not foresee this as being a problem to add it to our liability coverage.
Okay, so just to be clear, this is now, the city is now going to insure this, but at no additional cost.
At no additional cost, yeah.
Okay.
It's an option.
Does that deal with the question of the performance bond?
It does not.
Randy, can you give us a status on the performance bond?
Yeah, Dennis. Again, we've talked with these two companies about getting a performance bond. I think from my research, it's a surety bond, but in any event, it's a bond that would cover the situation where the Railroad Association was no longer able to maintain the bridge or keep the bridge. The bond itself would come into play after the bridge was moved. In other words, until the bridge is moved to the new location and the Railroad Association takes ownership of it from DelDOT, it is still DelDOT's bridge. The move would be under DelDOT. They would be paying for it. So at that time, and by that time, we will have an insurance policy in place. We do have to obtain financing for that, and we are working on it. And so our plan is to have that, and we don't plan to wait until the day that the bridge is moved, but we know it will take some time to get that insurance, and we will be getting that.
Thank you.
There would be no reason to have it in advance of them actually taking possession of it.
Can I ask one other question? What is, I mean, you mentioned earlier, Randy, you mentioned that you wanted to model this on the agreement, the MOU that the city has with the overfalls. I mean, are you, is your group anticipating asking for city services in connection with this? Trash mowing?
I don't foresee that. This is a static location. At the most, there might be a trash can there. You know, we've thought about that. I don't think that we would need restroom facilities. Landscaping might include a bench, might not, but I don't see need for city services as far as water, as far as sewer. Again, possibly a trash can would be the most I would foresee.
Okay.
The overfalls, as you know, people come on the ship. As you said, they put the gangplank down. As you said 2 weeks ago, they put the gangplank down and people come on. This is not a similar model. This is a static display. It's not for climbing, clearly not for climbing. It's for looking at, as I said, there'll be a historical marker. There may be a place to temporarily park your bike, maybe a bike rack or something like that. And hopefully, or not hopefully, but it would be designed to fit into the surroundings. So, people would look at it, probably not stay too long, appreciate the history of it. They would be able to go down the bike trail. I believe that DelDOT is planning to put some sort of area near the canal at the end of the trail that might be attractive, so people can go from the bridge itself, or would be able to go from the bridge itself to a lookout of the canal.
Any other questions for Randy? Randy,
No.
thank you very much for your work on this. I think good conversation here this afternoon regarding possibility of moving it one way or the other, repositioning it a little bit, also putting it where it would demonstrate how it functioned for people who would want to learn more about the bridge. And I think also tell the story of its significance to Lewis and Lewis during various other events that have happened here, including during World War II, the creation of Fort Miles. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy.
Okay, so we have a license agreement here that Glenn provided, and I assume that everyone had a chance to look over it. I think there is something in this that probably we would want to modify, if not strike, and that is on line 114 through 119 that has to do with the performance or surety bond. That it would not be effective. They wouldn't be able to get a policy within 6 months of the date of the license being executed. But I think what Randy has suggested is that they would have it in place at the time they took possession of the bridge from DelDOT. So that would be something I think we would need to modify in this contract or in this license agreement. I don't, others of you may have other modifications you think need to be made, but that's the one that came to my attention.
Well, this is Bonnie. I mean, I really think we need to call this what it is, which is a permanent placement.
Okay.
I mean, I honestly, I mean, 5 years, it's permanent placement. I don't, if we want to just take this on for really what's being requested and settle this thing, then we don't have to worry about a performance bond at all.
Okay.
that would be, and in fact, I'm going to surprise everybody here, probably most of all Randy, by proposing a motion, if everybody's ready for.
Go ahead.
All right, it's going to be one of my usual rambling motions, but I would propose that we grant a permanent license agreement to, well, you probably actually, you have to modify somehow, but we go ahead and allow a permanent placement of the swing bridge on the condition that Fred mentioned about it actually truly representing what's special about this bridge, and that it be moved in all likelihood to turn parallel to American Legion and away from the marsh in that corner where it's still visible from the bike trail. I don't think anyone's going to have any trouble seeing it if it's got an 8-foot chain link fence around it. The one thing that I think we need to work out, though, is what happens if sea level rise overtakes this location. And this bridge, I mean, what would happen then? Would it just stay there, or would it have to be moved? So that's kind of an open-ended thing, but I just don't think there's any point. I don't think it's fair to the group that's worked so hard on this to call it temporary when in fact it's not. And so we might as well settle expectations here, but this is 5 acres of land. I would like to preserve it for other future uses, and therefore not have the swing bridge essentially cut off that possibility for the city. And so we maintain a sense of openness and space over there. So I don't know if that was really a motion or what. Fred, I can't see you. I see the presentation, but I don't.
If
see-
Anne Marie could take the presentation down, maybe we could see one another.
There we
you
go. If everybody's done with the presentation.
Bonnie, I understand what you're saying, but
Yeah.
put that bridge parallel to American Legion would absolutely render it as a useless monument, I believe, because you're just going to be looking at the ends of these girders. Anyone that comes to see the bridge is going to be coming at a point that you would see the length of the bridge. I understand, I understand what you want to do, but believe me, if you want to make it a meaningful monument, it's going to have to be parallel to the trail, not perpendicular to the trail.
All right, well, how about putting it on the far end, meaning the farthest from American Legion Road, towards where there's that little kind of triangular jut out. I'm looking at this map. It would be on the north end.
So you want to put it closer to Freeman?
I don't
think what we have,
where it would be located along the length of the path. That's not my issue.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Then that's fine as long as we still can get to the same point by moving it.
Do you think we need to have some DelDOT weigh in on where's the best placement on that parcel, given the topography of the land? I don't know where it's best, but I don't know if any locations would be prohibitive.
It may be something that their engineers look at.
I think,
I think the main thing that DelDOT needs coming out of this meeting is whether or not it can be placed there. And if it can, they'll proceed with the planning accordingly. And it's possible that maybe the plan for placement be brought back to council at a future date.
That works.
I would make a motion that
Maybe we have one on the table.
we got a motion from Bonnie already.
Well, it was going to be a little
Bonnie,
bit.
you made a motion. We don't have a second on it.
True.
So,
I would
you know,
say-
we either need to withdraw. Go ahead. What are you going to say?
Sorry, my internet is
Bonnie?
acting up. Yeah, my internet is well, I would say on the DelDOT point that, you know what, since DelDOT wants to scrap the bridge, I don't know that they have a whole lot of standing about saying where it gets put exactly. As long as it's on city land, it seems to me they should be happy. But I'm all for somebody else taking another shot at the motion if I was unclear, which I have every confidence I was.
Okay. So Fred, you'll accept the withdrawal of that motion and let Fred.
I will gleefully withdraw my rambling motion and let somebody say it more succinctly, and then probably be happily second them.
All right, Fred.
I would simply propose that we give our approval to have the bridge located on the parcel of land that the city owns along the path at the end of American Legion Road. And then we will work with the group and Glenn to draw up an appropriate agreement for moving forward. But at this point, we can tell DelDOT we approve to have it placed there.
Okay.
Can I offer a friendly amendment? Instead of saying at the end of American Legion Bridge, road rather, which is a specific spot, just on the parcel. And that should be all that DelDOT needs.
Yeah,
That's all they need, right?
fine.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, I think we already had a Rob second, but you're seconding your amended.
I'm sorry, whatever.
Whatever.
Right,
Okay.
so Ted, you do have a question that came in through the chat?
Yeah, we had a question from Tim Rizzard. What is the present zoning of the parcel? And what does the comp plan show for this parcel's use? It is zoned open space, and it is, there was no specific use identified for it. Okay, thank you. Okay, is there any further discussion?
Can I just clarify on that?
Sure.
It's open space, and we've gotten advice from council that would be acceptable in the open space zoning. And there's nothing in the comp plan about what to do with this because we only recently discovered that the city owned it. So just a fuller answer to Tim's question.
Yeah, that's good. But there was not identified in the comp plan as a virtual future use item. But it is consistent with what we've done with the Monomoy shed and the Monomoy and other things over on Canal Front Park. It is an appropriate use in open space. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, I think we have agreed to accept the bridge being put on that parcel. And Randy, I think you can move forward with working with DelDOT.
Thank you, Randy.
And good luck, guys.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate
Very
it.
much. Yeah, appreciate all your efforts here. Okay. We are now ready then to move on to item I2, which is presentation of possible action on ordinance to amend chapter 33, Planning Commission, section 33-4, relating to the removal of Planning Commission members and said vacancies. Dennis, you want to talk about?
Did we just
Oh, we did that.
we just did that?
We did it.
All right, so
Yeah,
no,
we've done that.
We're I3.
I'm talking about I2.
Yeah,
so you've amended the planning commission bylaws at this point. This is an ordinance that would change the city code.
the ordinance,
Exactly.
okay.
Same thing, guys. We
Yeah,
just
this
have to
is
change the city code.
simply an ordinance to follow up on what we did with changing the bylaws.
Okay,
And therefore, I would make a motion to enact the ordinance to amend chapter 33, Planning Commission, section 33-4, relating to removal of Planning Commission members and vacancies.
okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Moving on to item I3, which is presentation of possible action on a recommendation by the Traffic Safety Advisory Committee to designate East Market Street between Cedar Street and Bay Avenue as an emergency access street in place of Massachusetts Avenue. Dennis and Fred, you've been working on this. You want to talk about it, one of you?
Well, I would simply say that the committee makes this recommendation because Massachusetts is a fairly narrow street. East Market is much wider and would accommodate the emergency vehicles better. And so
Okay.
we're recommending that we just change the emergency designation from Massachusetts to East Market. Dennis?
Yeah, I agree with Fred. And East Market is much wider. You can park on both sides of the street and still get an emergency vehicle down there, which you can't do in Massachusetts Avenue. And I think it's a much safer situation. The chief has weighed in on this and he's in agreement with it. He thinks it makes sense.
Okay. All right, if there's no,
Dennis, this is Rob. What does it mean that a street is an emergency access street?
Well, Rob, they put them in after they redid Bay Avenue because there was a situation where a house was hit by lightning and emergency vehicle couldn't get up one of the streets. So by designating this, we're saying that we're sure that an emergency vehicle can get up these designated streets, even if there are cars on either side of the road.
And
So
so,
Ted, you can also respond to this because Ted was a big part of the Bay Avenue project and putting these streets in, the emergency access streets in. If you want to add to that, Ted.
sure.
And it gives us the opportunity to limit, if we need to limit parking on one side in order to make sure that it can accommodate the emergency vehicles. So
Thank
I think it's important that we designate some of these streets so we can ensure access.
and is the fire department notified so that they know?
There's signage put up.
Signage.
There is
Yeah.
there are actually yellow signs put up. And Dennis was correct, Rob, that when we did Bay Avenue, we identified, I believe, 6 streets that became known as emergency access. And they were done based upon the width of the streets and what driveways were there that would have prohibited parking on the streets, so that we could guarantee or assure that emergency vehicles, be they fire trucks or EMS vehicles, could get down those streets to get to Bay Avenue.
And we also tried to consider the turning radius off of the connector street onto Bay Avenue. In some places, would be very tight for a long fire truck to make the turn. So
Now, if I'm not mistaken, is that stretch of East Market Street the same stretch on which we put, on which there are residents who met the
Right.
criteria
You're right.
that I think
That's
Bond
right.
drafted for having
Yes.
on-street parking reserved?
Yeah, but those are far, that street actually is quite wide there. It narrows once you get to Bay Avenue and goes around the corner and becomes Bayview.
Yes.
It becomes quite narrow. But from Bay Avenue to Cedar, it's actually quite wide there.
I'm just thinking that if, based on Fred's description of the purpose for designating an emergency access street, that we can then forbid parking on one side, that would conflict with the change that we made that Bonnie led a couple of years ago.
Well, I don't think we need
there were-
to, that road is wide enough that you don't need to restrict parking on either side
you don't.
and still have a fire truck go up there. It's very wide.
Okay,
None of
thanks.
the streets are that wide.
Yeah,
Thanks.
it may be the widest street between Bay and Cedar.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve this.
I would move that we approve the changing of the names in our code, changing Massachusetts from being an emergency street over to East Market being replacement emergency street. And we make that change in our code.
Okay,
I'll second it.
okay. All in favor?
Aye.
And I would note that not only we need to change it in the code, but we need to change, we should need to change it with the streets department so they get the signs moved. And
Oh,
we should probably also, Anne Marie, send notice to the residents in those 2 blocks that we are, changing, deleting one and adding the other as an emergency access street.
Might we notify the fire department as well, just.
Of course,
to be sure.
yes. Yeah. Okay. And moving on to item I4 is presentation and possible action on a recommendation by the Traffic Safety Committee to install white striping and a pedestrian crossing sign at the intersection of West Market and 2nd Street.
Well, the traffic committee had a comment provided to it concerning the crosswalk at King's Ice Cream over to the Biblion, that people might come out behind the building and step in front of a car, and that the crosswalk was not identified clear enough. They were suggesting mirrors. Mirrors wouldn't work, but what we've done on Front Street and Savannah Road is to put white striping on either side of the crosswalk. And so actually, I think we could amend this to say that we would like to put white striping on the sides of all of our crosswalks, because the brick kind of blends in with the dark pavement at night. So I would make a motion for us to consider and discuss that we would put white stripes along the sides of all of our crosswalks, and that way they would be more noticeable.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. I would just add that when the existing crosswalks, paver crosswalks were put in, they were put in with white pavers on each side.
Well,
So you have, okay, I'm just saying, they were put in a brick colored paver, and there is a band of white paver bricks on either side of those red pavers. So are we gonna then put a stripe beyond the pavers, or are we gonna put the stripe over the pavers? How much are we gonna do here? So I think that question, Anne Marie, I don't know whether you've looked at it or if you've had Ricky look at it or what.
So we have looked at it. We actually have, the price quote for it. And what we're looking at doing is putting, similar to how they've done on Savannah Road, where they've redone the
Yeah.
crosswalks.
With the painted one.
Using the thermoplastic that has the retro reflectivity. So it is visible in the dark. So that's what we have the estimate for the ones right there at Market, but also the others on Second Street as well.
We could amend
Okay, so my question,
to include that.
okay, that's fine, but is that white thermoplastic going to go over the white pavers that already exist, or is it going to go on the outside edge of it?
It'll go on the white pavers that exist.
Okay, that's fine. I think we need to just make sure that we're not just expanding the crosswalk beyond, because, Charlie was on this call. I don't know if he wants to weigh in on this, that GMB is the one who put the white pavers in the bid when we did Second Street to address that concern. I don't know if he's still on there or not.
I've just promoted him to panelist, so he should show up here soon.
There he is.
Is he here? You see him?
I don't see a picture, but I see his name.
Okay,
Hello,
there you are.
All
can
right.
you hear me?
Hey, Charlie.
Yeah.
Yep. Please speak up.
So I'm not over there right now, but I do recall what Ted was saying, that we have weight, a soldier course on either side, but I think somewhere along the line, I think there was a second beyond that weight soldier course. There's a second, like, it almost looks like thermoplastic on the outside of that, Ted.
Okay, we just need to look at it. So we just don't keep adding more stripes. I mean, if we're going to go over something, fine, but I don't want to keep broadening the pedestrian crosswalks. And we certainly need them. That's not the point.
Yeah.
But we need to make sure that we just don't keep adding another stripe on the outside edge of these things.
Yeah, well, I think if there's already thermoplastic that just needs to be replaced and upgraded on the outside of the soldier courses, I'd recommend going over that, because the soldier courses have an aesthetic effect.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we can make sure of that.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Very good. Okay.
To the aesthetics, Mayor, I thoroughly agree with the idea of the Traffic Safety Committee to put a crosswalk across West Market, a striped crosswalk, because that is a tricky spot. As for the ones directly across Second Street, I'm not so sure. There's certainly an aesthetic consideration. There are those who think that the crosswalks we've got in place now are much more attractive than white diagonal striping. The thermoplastic does wear out, will need to be replaced fairly often. That's a heavily trafficked street. And the traffic on Second Street tends to go very slowly. And I don't think people pay much attention to the crosswalk anyway.
That's true.
So I don't think it's a.
That is very,
Say again, Ted?
and that is very true. People don't pay much attention to the crosswalk.
Well, it's certainly on Second Street, simply because it's pretty safe. The width is very narrow between
Right.
parked cars and so forth. So I strongly support your idea of white striping across West Market. I'm not so wild about white striping across Second Street.
Well, if it pleases the council, we could limit it to across West Market and ask the GMB to take a look at the Second Street issues to make sure that they're good and visible, because at night there may be a problem.
That
But
sounds like a great idea.
I'm prepared to, if Dennis says to limit it to the West Market at this point, in addition to asking GMB to look at the Second Street issue.
Yeah.
I agree.
I think that sounds smart. I mean, the particular problem at Second and West Market is all the crowding at King's Ice Cream and people and kids, running. So
Absolutely.
you can't stop them. So the idea was to give some kind of warning and alert to the motorists, because people do go surprisingly quickly down that little alley by Biblion. So that, I think that was the whole goal of the exercise here.
This is
Well,
Charlie.
the other piece is that also the, what?
This is Charlie.
The other piece of this is that,
I'm just looking
hi,
at.
Charlie, what you got?
I'm just looking at Google Earth, which I understand they're older images, but they do show like thermoplastic beyond the soldier course of white brick or pavers on both sides of every crosswalk. So I think if we were to replace that, we'd only be making improvement.
Before we go, before we go
Well,
any
it
further.
sounds like we've got a modification.
Yeah, we also in our meeting with the Traffic Safety Committee, we were talking about the installation of a pedestrian crossing sign on the stop sign that's already there. Do we want to include that in our motion, or we want?
That's part of the recommendation.
I would include it in the motion, Dennis.
That is part of it.
Okay.
It is part of it, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have where are we with this motion? Are we going to have Charlie look at the Second Street stuff? Or are we going to go ahead with it? Rob, I know you objected to it. Fred, you seemed willing, you and Dennis both seemed willing to have Charlie look at it before we went ahead. Do you want to leave it that way, or do you want to go with the idea of just going ahead and having it done? Fred, Dennis?
I'm okay with having Charlie take a look at it. We'll just put it in on West Market Street and let Charlie decide what we need on the other crosswalks.
I'm good.
Okay. Okay. So Anne Marie, you have that as a motion?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And
Christine's getting the motions
Any-
down, so.
Opposed?
The motion is.
Okay, it's Christine's getting them. Okay.
The motion was to put
The motion,
white borders on the crosswalk. Make sure we have white borders on the crosswalk at West Market, parallel to Second Street at that intersection by King's Ice Cream. And that we would place a pedestrian crossing sign at that intersection along with the stop sign. The GMB would take a look at the crosswalks on Second Street as if they need any additional highlighting.
okay. All right.
Okay.
So hopefully Justin got that, okay? All right, so we have a motion and a second. I think we already voted on it in favor.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. Then moving on to item I5 is presentation of possible action on the renewal of a conditional use for a Cellco partnership for the telecommunications antenna on the existing tower located at 41 Cape Henlopen Drive. This has been an ongoing relationship for many, many years. The company's changed hands over the years. I don't think there's been any problems with this other than we've had a hard time catching up with them. And Marie, do you have anything else? Okay.
Is this the one
No.
that we had trouble getting payment on, or was that a different?
I
one?
think that was.
Was that the one?
This is the one.
Okay.
This is the one. Yeah, and I
Well-
think it's been resolved.
Yes, it has been resolved, and I know John Tracy was on. Yes, John Tracy's on, so do you have any questions for him? I can unmute him.
No, that was my only question, is that, that the payment was all up to snuff. Because
Yes.
I had thought that had been an issue a while ago. Okay.
Yeah, we had some issues there, but I think over the last year, we've been able to resolve all of those.
I think it may even have been a predecessor company. Not sure,
Exactly.
but-
Yeah, right. I think we hadn't noted or hadn't been advised of a change in the ownership of the company. And that's how we got out of sync. So, okay, so we need a motion to approve that.
So move.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to I6 is presentation of possible action on the renewal of a conditional use for BB Healthcare for mobile trailers connected to the former Lewis Convalescent Center, now known as the BB Office Building. This, as you'll recall, is all the way at the end of Market Street, down close to George H.P. Smith Park, and these trailers have been there. So I don't think there's been any problem with these there. I know they eventually plan to make some changes once they get finished with their improvements and their expansion in other facilities, but obviously they're looking to continue to use them while they're still undergoing that construction and expansion. Any questions or concerns? Anne Marie, is there anything on these that we have any concerns about?
No, it's pretty
Move
standard.
approval.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you,
Second.
Bonnie. Motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Okay, I noticed that we had a question here that we didn't answer from Sumner Crosby. It was given Bonnie's concerns about sea level rise. It looks like the highest ground is basically where the map shows the bridge in the presentation. The little northern triangle will be wet in several decades. I think, we just need, I don't have a official answer to that. I think when DelDOT starts looking at the site and trying to place it, all of those considerations will have to be taken into consideration.
The whole thing's going to be
In
wet.
time,
Let's
absolutely,
face
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And then the question's going to be, and that's something to be worked out, what happens to the bridge? I mean,
Right,
clearly the city shouldn't then pay to have to move it again, but that's going to have to be worked out with the association.
exactly, at the time that comes up. Okay, so we deleted,
Hold on,
Yeah.
Ted, we do have a raised hand here, somebody by the name of Robert, so I will unmute him.
Okay, thank you. I didn't see that one, okay.
Robert, are you there? Maybe it was an error. There's nobody. Okay,
I didn't see it. Okay, so then we deleted I7 and I8. We're on to I9, which is presentation possible action on amendments of the city's COVID-19 policy regarding employee leave. Anne Marie, you want to talk about that? We adopted a policy at our last meeting. Wanna talk about-
yes. So the big question we have with this is, it allows for 14 days. And one of the allowances is if the staff person has an underlying health condition and has a note from their doctor that they can't come to work. At this point, anybody in that circumstance has been offered the opportunity to work from home. So from our perspective, this is, I guess it's more of an update. I don't think it needs to be formally changed, but if somebody's staying home and choosing not to work from home because of an underlying health issue, unless they've got something from their doctor saying that they cannot work from home, we're having them work from home or else have to use their leave. I just wanted to kind of keep you aware of that. Because we do have quite a few people who are working remotely. We've gotten the laptops, gotten the technology out to them to be able to do that. So we just wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page there. Are there any questions?
Anne Marie, this is Rob. I didn't quite follow the need for it. Are there people who are staying home and not working? Is that the idea?
Well, at some point, it looked like we might end up with that, and I wanted to make sure that we weren't in a position of paying people who were not working if they had the ability to work from home.
Thank you.
And I think one of the concerns, this came up early on before we had gone fully able to have remote access for everyone. But now
Right.
everyone who's in an administrative position has remote access. So the likelihood that somebody would be staying home because they have an underlying condition should be remediated by now.
Right.
Correct?
Yeah, it took a while to get rolled
But I
out.
think
So
that,
we had about a week where we just paid people regardless because it wasn't their fault that we weren't up and running for them to work. So that took about a week to get rolled out. But at this point, either people are working remotely
right.
or the office.
Yeah. Well, and that was not, the 14-day policy was not something that was, could be renewed, correct?
Right, and that was kind of the concern, that if somebody says, well, I can take 14 days, well, they take 14 days and then this goes on for another couple months. We just, so I think the issue when it was put on the agenda, I think we were concerned there was more of an issue, but I think at this point, we're far enough along that we don't think the policy needs to be formally changed, but we just wanted to update you on how we've moved through.
I just think we need to make sure that is the understanding of the policy and that the employees understand it, that it's
And they do. One of the things that we're doing is we have a one-page report that is a fillable PDF that we're having employees do who are working from home, just so that it's clear that, that they have things, they're working on it. If they need something additional, they let us know. We're really trying to keep the communication up to make sure that we don't miss something in the mix there.
Okay, great. All right. I don't think that requires any action. I do appreciate the update on that. It seems to me that you've already clarified it, and hopefully we all are understanding of it. Does anyone feel we need action? I don't see what we do. Okay.
No.
All right, good. Is there anything else anyone has to bring forward?
Nope.
Hearing none, I would note that our next regularly scheduled meeting is May the 11th. However, we will certainly reserve the right to schedule a special meeting if necessary between now and then with proper notice. Obviously, we're dealing with a very fluid situation, and we'll have more information from the governor tomorrow. He has a mayor's call tomorrow, and Anne Marie and I probably will both participate in that, and we'll go from there.
Don't go.
What you got? Another question?
Is it on the agenda, Glenn?
It is on the agenda. So the agenda was amended to include an item that says certification of the election. This is the meeting at which the candidates are
of course
certified for the election under the charter. So we added that. If we need to ratify it next month, we may do that, but we wanted to take an opportunity to ratify.
Okay, yep. For some reason, I'm not seeing it on the agenda I pulled up, but
it's not on the agenda I have either.
Nor I.
Since we have plenty of time, we can just wait till next month.
Well, Glenn, do you?
We can wait. It's just that it's a charter requirement that specifically says the April meeting of council.
Okay, well.
Yeah, I don't know what happened because I republished the agenda after I added it.
It's not on the copy I have.
Oh, now Ellen Lorraine said it's on the agenda again. So it's not on the paper copy, right? Because it was added later.
Okay.
Okay, well, that's sufficient for FOIA though, right?
If it's sufficient, if it was noticed that way, yes.
Yeah.
Well, Glenn, do you want to talk about how we were talking about handling it?
We didn't give the 7 days notice because of everything that was going on. We just sort of realized that the charter requirement is for this month. So we decided to add it to the agenda so that you could take action consistent with what the charter requires. We may put it on the agenda again next month, properly notice 7 days in advance so you can ratify your action.
Okay.
But it's a simple one-page certification of the candidates. So I kind of like to do it so you've taken the action.
And Glenn, the certification,
Okay.
the purpose of it is
Do we have
to,
a motion?
The purpose is to certify the candidates meet the criteria for being candidates. I can read it to you if I can bring it up here. So it says, it's very short. It says the City of Lewis certification election 2020. I do hereby certify that the following candidates have filed for the positions of councilperson and have met the necessary criteria. Therefore, an election will be held on the first Saturday following 45 days after the governor's state of emergency is terminated, in accordance with the resolution approved by mayor and city council on March 30, 2020. And then for councilperson, Fred Buffet, Kay Carnahan, Dennis Reardon, Tim Rizzert, and Andrew Williams, and it's signed by the city manager.
and the only modification to what you just read is, I think, if the first Saturday following the 45-day expiration is a holiday weekend, then, but you said in accordance with the adoption by the city council.
That's why that's added, just to be, yeah.
Yeah, I added the in accordance with to cover all of that rather than put the whole thing in there.
Great.
Yeah, only adds to confusion. Okay. So we have a motion to approve that.
So moved.
So moved.
I would
Wait a
abstain.
minute. Whoa, I can't do it. I have to recuse.
Yeah, I would recuse myself.
Thanks.
So I think Rob moved and I seconded.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so all in favor,
Aye.
noting that Dennis and Fred recused. Okay. Now, is there anything else to bring forward?
That's it.
Hearing none.
Ted, one thing, if I may have misheard, but I thought you said our next council meeting is May 11. Isn't it May 10? Oh, no, I'm looking at the wrong year. Sorry. I got a year ahead of
May
myself.
11th.
Well, so when you all approved
We changed it, I know.
you changed it to the 18th when you set the meetings for the whole month, for the whole year. But
Yeah.
that was based on there being an election on the 9th. So your
Right.
normal meeting date would be the 11th, which at this point, there's no reason to move it because you're not swearing in any candidates that night. So
Good,
it could go ahead on the 11th.
good.
And we may have to have based upon when the election actually occurs, we may have to have a change of another meeting date.
Right.
Depending upon that. So I think we can go back to our regularly scheduled May 11th meeting.
Got it.
Okay.
And what time is it going to be scheduled? Do you foresee that now?
We haven't set a time. I know we had one objection today saying that someone was working from home and that they couldn't attend because they were working from home. I think in the interest of what we're doing, assuming that we're still in this mode, I would think 2 o'clock works pretty well. Does anybody have strong feelings about it?
I think it works well myself.
Given everybody's at home, most people are able to tune in.
We had
There are some people who work and are working from home and therefore can't make it.
I understand.
Yeah.
We had
I'm
80
good.
something participants today. That's pretty
At one point we did, you're right. We're down to like 29 now.
that's
But
understandable. But I mean, I just mentioned that to say it certainly looks like people are
Able.
aware and are attending.
right.
I mean, I don't really
I
care.
think we can put a note. Let's leave it at 2. And I think we can put a note on the website, Anne Marie, saying that we will hold our next meeting at 2 o'clock on the 11th. And
Okay.
that way we've given people a month's notice.
Well, I can go ahead and put it on the website as, now so that people can at least see it's happening.
Okay.
Do we also want to go ahead and set an executive session if we need one for 11?
That's fine.
We can do that.
All right. Is there anything else to bring forward? Hearing
Everybody
none,
be safe.
What?
I said, everybody be safe.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Thank you all for doing all you can to be safe, those of you who are still listening. And thanks, council. Thanks to all of you for all you're doing. It's been a very strange time that we're living through, but I've seen people doing, from my vantage point where I sit in my home office, I can see Canal Front Park and I see an awful lot of people using it, but generally being very respectful of the safe distancing principle. So that's encouraging to see. So I thank you all. And again, we thank the BB staff for all they're doing to help our community adjust and adapt, and if necessary, treat those who are affected by this virus. Thank you very much for the time today. We'll see you soon.
And just, you have Doug Spellman said thank you to all of you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks, Doug. All right. Good afternoon. Thanks you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.